while Breath of the Wild was a great game, there was a lot of things that traditional Zelda fans missed out on that could have made it perfect. Themed dungeons or temples, underwater exploration, more variety of enemies, and much, much more. With Breath of the Wild 2 on the horizon, here are 10 ways to make it the perfect Zelda game. Underwater exploration. Nintendo said that working on Wind Waker HD gave them a lot of ideas for Breath of the Wild. One thing that may have taken a bit too much of an influence from Wind Waker, Link cannot dive or explore underwater. This is something that Nintendo gave us in the very first 3D Zelda game, and aside from Wind Waker, it has been a staple of every 3D Zelda game since. We get a full set of Zora armor. We can swim up waterfalls. We revisit the teased relationship from Ocarina of Time with Princess Ruto. We can even ride on Prince Sidon, freeze water to make platforms, but we can't swim under the water to explore. Maybe Nintendo took all of the complaints about the water temple to heart, which brings us to our next item on this list. Themed temples and dungeons. For what seems like the very first time ever, especially in a 3D Zelda game, Nintendo took out themed temples. In its place, we got shrines and 4 main dungeons. Instead of temples, they are divine beasts. Aonuma said that he wanted to somehow incorporate giant, dynamic dungeons that moved around the overworld, instead of the single stationary themed temples or caves that we're used to. The divine beasts were great on their own, but are no replacement for actual themed dungeons or temples. Yes, we are aware that some of the shrines and some of the divine beasts did have certain elemental themes, from fire, water, ice, electricity, and everything else, but they aren't nearly as interesting as the actual themed dungeons and temples, because they always still kept that same blue aesthetic. Once again, did Nintendo take everyone's hate for the water temple too seriously? Match this with our next thing on the list, and I think we could have the perfect solution. Mini dungeons, like caves, being a part of the world. Searching around hidden sections of Hyrule and coming across a wall to bomb or just a simple entrance out in the open is something that has been in the heart of Zelda games since its original release on the Famicom Disk System. In Breath of the Wild, these were replaced by shrines. While we had 120 of them, not including the dozen or so in the DLC, once again, just as with the temples being replaced by the divine beasts, these shrines would be great as a companion piece, but not if it replaces what we already had. Sure, solving overworld puzzles, quests, and other things to find a new one is very rewarding, but when you enter it and instantly get a spirit orb, it's just like, oh, okay then, guess I'll be on my way. Twilight Princess and Wind Waker did mini dungeons the best. Even Ocarina of Time had an amazing one with the bottom of the well and the ice cavern. Wind Waker had what would have been full-length dungeons, but the game was rushed and had them cancelled and had them turned into mini dungeons. Sort of. Like Fire and Ice Islands, Great Fish Isle, possibly the Ghost Ship, and who knows what else. Twilight Princess had a lot of dungeons, but still had great mini dungeons hidden throughout the world. Some were actually more complex than we would expect from a game already filled with so many full-length dungeons. The best way to implement this with Breath of the Wild 2 is something I've been saying since I first played Breath of the Wild. Keep the 4 divine beasts, but take away about half of the shrines. Give us anywhere from 40 or 50 to be spread around the overworld, and give us that reason to explore. Take the room puzzles and concepts you would implement inside of those shrines, and create full themed temples out of them. Typically, a good dungeon size would be about the size of 5 to 10 of the shrines. Take about 10 or more of them, or what would be shrines, and place them into actual overworld mini dungeons, like we had in Twilight Princess. This way, everyone is happy, nothing is taken away. We just replace some of the extraordinary amount of 120 shrines, cut them in half, and make actual dungeons and mini dungeons from those concepts and ideas. In the end, we would end up with like 4 divine beasts that are constantly moving around the world, anywhere from 40 to 60 shrines hidden, 5 to 7 actual themed dungeons or temples, most likely 1 for each major region, and about 10 or so mini dungeons or caves hidden around the world. Multiplayer. For years, Aonuma has been telling us what he wants, and he wants a main series 3D multiplayer Zelda game. Even with Zelda Wii U, which came to be known as Breath of the Wild, Aonuma didn't want it to be a single player experience. He literally told us in the very first Nintendo Direct, which revealed Zelda Wii U and Wind Waker HD, finally, after Breath of the Wild released, Aonuma was asked what he wanted to do in the next Zelda game. He stated he wanted to take what he learned from the multiplayer of Triforce Heroes and apply it to the Breath of the Wild engine. A few months later, the president of Nintendo and others said they wanted to push their online service in every major game, which works perfectly with what Aonuma wants to do. And wouldn't you know it? He isn't just reusing the Breath of the Wild engine to make a new Zelda game, as he said he wanted to do, he is literally making another Breath of the Wild, which they said was because they had so many ideas and concepts for the original that they couldn't put it all into a single game. So perhaps multiplayer may be one of the ideas or concepts left out of the original that they wanted to have and can finally implement. Time travel. Almost every Zelda game has had some sort of time travel. 7 years in Ocarina of Time, thousands of years in Skyward Sword, a few months or years in Oracle of Ages and Seasons, 3 days in Majora's Mask. Twilight Princess had you travel back in time an unknown amount of years for the Temple of Time. This was oddly missing in Breath of the Wild. We did have the memories and cutscenes which showed us what it looked like 100 years ago, but it wasn't nearly the same as actually visiting them. Imagine being able to actually visit and explore all of the areas in Hyrule before they were destroyed, exploring all of the houses, markets, and talking to all the people, visiting the same Lon Lon Ranch from Ocarina of Time before it was destroyed. The perfect way to do this goes alongside the dungeons and shrines idea. Give us the Temple of Time, just as we had it in Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword. Allow Link to place the Master Sword into the Pedestal of Time and be transported back 100 years or so ago. Maybe it can be the reward for beating the Temple of Time, unlocking the Pedestal of Time or the Gate of Time, which allows you to go back and try to stop Calamity Ganon before he ever corrupts the Guardians. Something like how we killed Demise in the present and the past in Skyward Sword. Great DLC. Breath of the Wild had great DLC. Not amazing, not perfect. It wasn't exactly what everyone wanted, but it was actually great. It gave us a lot more story, a harder difficulty, a lot more shrines that were actually better than a lot of the original, one of my favorite quests with the one-hit obliterator, tons of new masks, lots of new armors, the Master Sword trials, which made you completely rethink how you played the game, amazing cutscenes, and everything else it included. And we can't really forget Baby Sidon, can we? So what did everyone want? Actual dungeons and temples to be added, or something to do with exploring the past. But perhaps Nintendo didn't want to implement this because they were saving it for Breath of the Wild 2. Bring Wolf Link back or other companions. I love Wolf Link. You love Wolf Link. It would truly be a shame if they removed him completely from the game. With Aonuma wanting to add multiplayer to Zelda Wii U, when they announced Wolf Link, I instantly thought, that is perfect. Wolf Link is 100% optional. You can play the entire game without ever summoning him, but if you do, you have more fun and you get into more shenanigans. Now, imagine having your friend pick up the second controller, and instead of the AI or computer controlling Wolf Link, imagine if it was your friend beside you, or somewhere online. Then, imagine what if it wasn't just Wolf Link you could summon, but you could summon Daruk, or Bosa, Revali, Mipha, or even Sidon. I would even play around with Hestu and terrorize my friend playing as Link. Again, it's best to keep it completely optional, but give us at least a few shrines or mini dungeons that expand on the multiplayer concept. Puzzles that need to be solved by 2 or more people. If people don't want it in the game, they can just stay away from these non-important shrines. Most people didn't even complete all 120 shrines anyways. Maybe they can do what Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time did, and give us Princess Ruto, Makar, or someone that we can take control of, by playing a song or using a certain required item. How amazing would those dungeons have been in Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time if instead of playing a song to control the character or carrying Ruto around, a second player could play as them? Even Majora's Mask had the one mini dungeon where you play as Kafei, everyone's favorite cursed child, Loft Wings. Once again, I've been saying this since Skyward Sword. especially with Breath of the Wild's beautiful world. How amazing would it be to fly around freely and look down on Hyrule? When I bring this up, people usually say that would ruin all of the exploration, but it couldn't be further from the truth. It would add to the exploration, if anything. You would see places that you've never been to before. In Breath of the Wild, you literally get to warp almost anywhere you want. You have around 200 areas that you can warp to, and even get a magical item that lets you place it specifically where you want to warp. Most Zelda games only allow you to have maybe a dozen or so, if that. Also, Breath of the Wild gives you a motorcycle, the Master Cycle. So if that doesn't ruin exploration, what would? An easy way to remedy the taking away from exploration? Just give us the Loft Wing towards the end of the game, like they did with the Master Cycle, or give us an in-game reason as to why it can't fly to unexplored areas, like it's afraid of too many monsters being there or something. A lot of people also like to say, Jesse, you just described flying on Rivali for the Divine Beast, and I have to say it's almost nothing like that. Yes, you are flying, and you can see the ground below, but it's a tiny portion of the land, and you can't really choose where you want to go. It forces you to stay in the area, and you're basically on rails, kind of like you're playing Star Fox or Pokemon Snap. You can't just fly over Lake Hylia, get a new view of the Gerudo Desert, or explore all of the amazing things hidden in the Faron region, landing on top of a waterfall or dropping bombs on a Lynel, maybe jumping off of it at a high speed and just seeing how far you can glide on your paraglider. Restored villages. As we mentioned in the time travel segment, a world is much more interesting to explore when you can visit places that aren't completely ruined. Imagine playing Skyrim, World of Warcraft, or Witcher 3. And every single place, except maybe 2 or 3, are completely destroyed. Those worlds that feel alive with so much to do would suddenly be completely boring unless done correctly. If we can't travel into the past before everything was destroyed in Breath of the Wild 2, allow the game to take place a little bit in the future, enough time for the cities to be rebuilt. Then again, they literally have a magical Triforce that they could just use to wish for everything to be brought back and fixed. So realistically, the game could take place about an hour after Breath of the Wild and have the entire world back to the way it was over 100 years ago. All by wishing on a magical golden triangle. Bonus Tingle. Tingle. Give us Tingle. We got his tunic, we literally have an island named after him. Beetle can be found in more places in Breath of the Wild than Tingle's brothers can be found in The Wind Waker, and believe me, that's a lot. Thank you Nintendo for all of the hard work that you put into Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2. Hiring dozens of new developers from Monolith Soft, who worked on the Xenoblade series, and getting them to work on Breath of the Wild. Thank you, but all you have to do, give us Tingle. Number 10. A second world. Hyrule was huge and amazing, but I wanted so much for the DLC to add a Dark World or some kind of second world. Keep the same major geography, but make small changes, like Lorule and the Dark World did to Hyrule in A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds, like the Twilight Realm and Twilight Princess, the present and the future in Ocarina of Time, or even the Silent Realm in Skyward Sword. It doesn't need to be a completely different world like Termina and Hyrule, Subrosia, Labrina, Holodrum, or any of the others. Just minor changes with a different atmosphere. Lake Hylia is now a cursed swamp. The river is now dried up. This mountain over here is now a giant pyramid. Whatever crazy nonsense they want to do with it. If it doesn't have a parallel world, let us explore that area to the north. If Breath of the Wild 2's version of Hyrule doesn't have a parallel world, let us explore that giant area to the north, which, yes, had houses and stuff there. We just couldn't reach it without cheating.